Alright. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. Guess what? We've got StarCraft 2 patch notes that have dropped. I've had no warning of this. There were no reasonings written alongside these notes, and I personally have no idea where these changes came from. So, we can only imagine the Classic Games department has decided to step in, say, hey, we'll be the David Kim everyone's been asking for in the community, just make decisions ourselves, and then seek feedback from the community. And that's kind of good, honestly. It's bad because historically Classic Games has not had any time or resources to put towards StarCraft, but it's good that at least someone's taking responsibility rather than, say, a content creator like myself going in and trying to get the community to all offer up some sort of consensus. That being said, let's actually read through the changes and see if they're any good. Alright guys, so we've got the Zerg changes first. Spire cost reduced from 200 to 150 150. There was a typo. They had the number wrong on the minerals previously. Everyone was laughing at them. Thankfully, they fixed that. Centrifugal hooks now gives +5 hit point bonus to banelings again. Microbial shroud reduces range attacks by 50% damage, which is crazy. But we'll talk about everything after. Give me a moment. Microbial shroud effect no longer persists for a few seconds after the unit has left the shroud. Yeah, if you're gonna make it that good, definitely you can't have the shroud follow the unit after it leaves it. All right, next up is Protoss. We've got energy overcharge grant has been reduced from 100 to 50 energy. Energy overcharge cooldown reduced from 60 to 45 seconds. Mothership hit points reduced from 350 to 300. Psionic Storm duration increased from 2.86 to 8.58. What? It's like 2.5 times the duration. I think that might actually be more than 2.5 times. But the damage reduced from 10 to 5 damage per tick. So it's 50% the damage per second, but 2.5 times the duration, so it's turned into a big zoning tool. Dark Templar blink attack delay reduced from 0.75 to 0.25. Surveillance mode now reveals the observers. Surveillance mode increases vision from 13.75 to 15, which is kind of wild. Terran siege tank can no longer be abducted when in siege mode. Viking cost reduced from 150.75 to 125.50. Drilling Claw's effectiveness increased from 1.07 to 0.71. That's a revert of an old nerf, that is. Hyperspeed rotors. It should be called Hyperflight, is what it's called. Hyperflight rotors. Research time is decreased to 79. Be nice if they said what that was brought down from. I believe it's 100 seconds at the moment. I think it used to be like 2 minutes. They brought it down to 100, bringing it down again to 79, which makes sense. I mean, why does it take so long for that upgrade to go? Is crazy. There's also a couple of bug fixes. Issue with the Cyclone getting the wrong bonus from upgrades. Fix an issue with the Cyclone lock-on cooldown. Fix an issue with the Mothership attack at max range. I can't remember if that was causing it to... I think it was bugging out and not attacking as much as it should have. Or maybe it was actually getting bonus range. I can't quite remember. If you guys remember exactly what the Mothership... I know there was a Mothership bug basically since the start of the season. Let me know in the comments exactly what that was. Fix an issue with orbital commands not auto-rallying. Yeah. So if you built a command center, you know, your buildings, your hatcheries, your command centers, your Nexi, I believe they auto-rally to the minerals upon being built. Apparently that's the thing. I don't know. I still click them on the minerals out of habit because that's what I do. But apparently Terrans, when it upgrades to an orbital, it would remove the rally point. And that was kind of pissing off a lot of Terran players at the top. So fair enough. All right, guys, let's actually talk about these changes. And let's start from the top. The biggest one is actually not Shroud. That's crazy and huge. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about Storm. This Storm change is absolutely bananas. Now, obviously, just reading that, it sounds like, okay, that's interesting. But like 50% damage reduction is insane. I mean, there's zoning tool and then there's... is this actually going to be good or not? So we've gone on Reddit. A lot of people have already been testing it. And I don't know if this is just incorrectly implemented or it's just the number is that low. But as you can see, it's not exactly a force to be reckoned with. A Marine can run through 3 storms if it has combat shields and survive. Like, what? So a few of these Reddit threads have popped up, right? So this person's like, all right, let's throw some storms down. Remember, it lasts like 8.5 seconds. The mutas even clump in it, and they barely take any damage. In StarCraft 2, the engine is so smooth. Units do clump up a lot, which makes splash damage brutal. But also, they move so fluidly that they can get through splash damage quickly. So there's a dichotomy here where if you want it to be more like StarCraft 1, hey, let's make splash damage not as brutal. Well, actually, splash damage is insanely brutal in StarCraft 1. It's just the units naturally spread out because of the way the engine works. But at the same time, it's hard to move out of the storm in StarCraft 1. StarCraft 2, you'll see players walk into a storm and instantly like split their army in 4 directions. StarCraft 1 units would be like, and they'd kind of like hang out in storm for a few seconds. It's very different the way this behaves. We even had this one here. Check this out. I'm sorry, I'm going to zoom in on this very low res GIF. So check it out. So he's going to drop some storms. So those lings just ran through 2 whole storms, and a bunch of them took no damage. So I think, I don't know if they changed the frequency at which the damage ticks as well. Clearly this is implemented incorrectly. It should still be ticking every, I think at the moment Storm does 10 damage every half a second. I actually thought it was 5 damage. I remember having an argument with Roddy about this years ago, and he was like insistent that it was one of those, and I was insistent it was the other, and it turned out I was right, and I can't even remember which one now. So all I remember is that I was right. Take that, Rotterdam. Anyway, point is, obviously this is a wild change. Only reason I think people are so up in arms about storms at the moment is because energy recharge in these nerfs. Energy recharge basically means there's unlimited storms at the moment. That's why storm's such a big issue. There was, years where no one was playing storm, and I was like, guys, storm's still pretty good. You should mix in a storm drop opening sometimes. Use the prism storm with your charge zealots. And like Hero was the only guy doing it for a while. This patch has brought back storm in a big way, and everyone has so many storms due to energy recharge. Such a big power spike when storm kicks in. Storm used to be a very quick upgrade to kick in, but then you'd have like 2 storms ready, and if those didn't do crucial damage, you're like, hey opponent, give me 2 minutes to warp in Moriah Templar, wait for them to have storms, and then I'll be ready for the next fight. If the opponent just kept the tempo up, you could get overwhelmed, right? Because it wasn't reliable, consistent splash damage. Energy recharge did so much to shore up that weakness. I think really energy recharge, this nerf is crazy. So it does more than enough. I would only lower energy recharge down to 75, guys. I would not lower it. I wouldn't change the cooldown to be faster. I would just make it 75 energy. That way you don't get 2 storms. It's a little bit less brutal. But, this at least does make it much weaker for oracles and stuff as well. This does do a lot more to nerf the overall thing. But then to also nerf the heck out of storm doesn't make sense. Now, where it might actually make sense is if you're doing a kind of wild overhaul of splash damage in StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2 fights outside of pro level are generally considered to be quite brutal and a bit too sudden and punishing. They kind of always have been. StarCraft 2 looked at StarCraft 1, looked at Age of Empires 2, looked at Warcraft 3 and said, no, these games are far too slow. We don't want just StarCraft 1, which was considered one of the faster paced, high lethality RTS games. We want to make it way faster than that. And I remember the StarCraft 1 players. I remember Legionnaire, famous, player from the very early days of StarCraft 1, when he was trying StarCraft 2, and there was an interview with him being like, this game is so much faster than StarCraft 1. It's crazy how fast StarCraft 2 is. That's at the beginning of StarCraft 2. It's just always been a lot faster. So maybe you want to do something like, let's make the game less punishing. People hate having their whole army get blown up by a disruptor shot or a storm or, bloody whatever it is, right? Banelings rolling in when they're not looking. So how about we change this in a way where all splash damage is less? I think if you're going to do that, you still need the number to at least be like 60, maybe 70% of the original damage, just because the way the game works, everything else is so high damage as well. Otherwise, the splash damage is going to become probably not impactful. You're just going to have lots of basic units fighting, or higher tech, but A-movie units, non-spellcasters, non-splash damage units, right? It also means if you nerf all these other forms of splash damage, they're just going to be incredibly lackluster compared to something like a Colossus or an Archon or a Baneling that splash damage stays the same. So to me, it feels like it would be very hard to target specifically spell damage here and nerf that. And like I said, I don't know where these changes came from. There's no reasoning written alongside these changes here. So I'm kind of just looking at them and theory crafting, and I'm trying to go in good faith and go, what is the exact goal of this? I think one of the other big issues you're going to have if you try to do this is essentially Zerg and Terran are nowhere near as reliant on splash damage as Protoss. So we've already nerfed the Disruptor. Storm's become super central. If we now nerf Storm as well, it's like, wait a second, are we nerfing Banelings? Are we nerfing Siege Tanks? Are we nerfing Widow Mines? If we want to go down this vein, I feel like there's like a whole swathe of let's nerf splash damage across the board changes a bit. And that's okay, let's do that. It's a much bigger patch list than this, though. You would need a much more comprehensive list, number one. The other big problem The other big problem is that Zerg and Terran are not reliant on splash damage nearly as much as Protoss, right? I mean, if we think of Zealot Stalker in the late game, it's a pretty bad army. Marine Marauder's going to beat the heck out of that, right? Marine Marauder Ghost especially. Even if we nerf the heck out of EMP, which is something which I really want to do, I would love to nerf the way EMP affects shields, make it a bit less insane, especially against big units, so that it's maybe a damage over time. And I've got a bunch of ideas in my proposed changes, which we can talk about. Point being, guys, if we're going to do this, how do you make Protoss competitive? If you nerf the heck out of Storm and stuff, and the thing is, I like the idea of taking away the gimmicks of like maybe even completely remove energy recharge. You know, take away some of these like really ridiculous things. Maybe nerf the Oracle so it's not such a central part of like PvZ openings, but find a way to buff gateway units. Maybe you remove Warp Gate or nerf it. Maybe you buff the regular units so that they can compete with Terran and Zerg while still having disruptors and storms that are somewhat, you know, nerfed. Of course, to do that, you'd still need the tools for Terran and Zerg to be somewhat nerfed as well. The Widow Mines, the Banelings. My point being, it's just a very comprehensive thing that would be very difficult to tackle. Targeting one spell in isolation like this is going to be incredibly difficult to get right balance-wise. Now, obviously, I assume anyone who's looked at those GIFs knows these numbers suck, right? They know these numbers aren't doing anything. Let's say they put the damage up to halfway between. So it's, you know, it gets closer to its previous damage and lasts maybe for 6 seconds. Because what's it gone? What did they say? It's from 2.86 to 8.58. Let's say it goes to 5.5 seconds, halfway in the middle, but it does 80% of the damage of what it currently does, or whatever that is, right? Maybe we can test that. Maybe that's actually okay, because you're keeping the strength of the spell relatively similar. It zones an area for longer, does a little bit less damage. That's actually an actual adjustment to the spell, and maybe that makes more sense. Maybe they just were spitballing numbers and just came to completely the wrong conclusion. I feel like even basic testing, for me, just eyeballing it, I knew these numbers were bad, but it is what it is. We'll see where it goes. Okay, so other than the patch notes kind of being very half-baked in this change, there's also the Microbial Shroud, I think, is the other really big controversial change that we need to talk about. Microbial Shroud reduces range attacks by 50% damage. Now, this is basically turning Microbial Shroud into Dark Swarm. It means that you can throw down these shrouds and run through at your opponent. For those who don't know how StarCraft 1 worked, in Dark Swarm, it's this insanely overpowered spell. You finally get to it tier 3 with your Defiler, which is a little scorpion guy that... the more famous spell is probably Plague, which is the red stuff that damages units down to 1 hit point. But essentially, Dark Swarm, it would go in an area, this big orange cloud. It would last for like 45 seconds or something ridiculous. And I believe it was all ranged damage would do no damage in there. So like if a siege tank was shooting, its splash damage would hit the adjacent units, but the unit it was actually attacking would take no damage. So Lings and Ultras and Hydras and stuff could run through there, but mostly, you know, your Lings and your Ultras, and basically take no damage from Marines, from tanks, all this sort of thing. I'm not sure if the Spider Mine would still do damage with its direct attack or its splash. I'm not a StarCraft 1 expert by any means. I'm a pretty big noob at it, who loves the campaigns and played it growing up, but didn't really play multiplayer much. But essentially, this is turning that into a lesser version of that, where it's, okay, all your range damage, 50% less. So if you're moving in, you're throwing down your Microbial Shrouds, your Ultras, rather than taking 65 damage from a fully upgraded Immortal, and now taking 32.5 damage, which is a massive reduction. Marines are going to be doing very little damage. Marauders are going to be doing very little damage. Now, this is an interesting idea because it does allow Zerg to kind of close the distance with the opponent in the late game. You still need to cast these spells, but it's going to be creating situations of two types in my mind. One, where the opponent engages, you throw shrouds down, and they just run away. They just stutter step away because no one wants to fight near that shroud. But if you can ever surround them or trap them and they have to fight in the shroud, they're going to get wrecked, right? That's one thing that can happen. The other thing is that Terran's just going to lose every game once Infestors come out. Now, obviously, it's a global effect, so Roaches won't do damage either, just like Dark Swarm. So Roach Hydra wouldn't be used as much, but if you're using Ling, Bane, Ultra, that sort of stuff, and Lings and Banes, like, so fast moving, the problem is always closing the distance with your opponent. I feel like this is going to mesh way too well with Ling, Bane, and Ultras as well, because you're just going to get through. You're not going to get shot down on the way in. If you ever surround an enemy army, it's going to... I feel like it's just going to be so hard to balance this, but I am curious to see how it plays out. The problem is that if you think about it, you go, well, okay, I mean, it's only reducing range damage. You can still play around it by using melee units. Protoss has Zealots. Dark Templar. I think they're their only melee units. Okay, all right. Not really the best frontline combat unit in the late game, is it? Terran has no melee units at all. So melee doesn't get around it. Well, spell damage gets around this effect, right? Okay. Protoss has Storm, Disruptors. They still have things that can stop Ling Bane getting on top of them, if not the Ultras as effectively. Though, assuming we're just talking about the current version of Storm, not this new Storm, of course. On the other hand, you've also got Terran, who have Widow Mines and Snipes, which aren't on their own going to be reliable at stopping Ling Bane getting on top of you. So, to me, this feels like it would be super duper powerful Microbial Shroud, huge buff to Zerg. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's probably going to be crazy powerful. I want to see how it plays out. I feel like it's going to be kind of impossible to balance, just because Terran is all range damage, especially. I don't know. It's going to be really weird to see how this works. It just there's no description of this. Obviously, I haven't played any games yet. I'll go play some games, come back with more thoughts, but we'll have to wait and see kind of where this one's going. All right, last big change I want to talk about, because the others are all just kind of small things that I don't think are really worth touching on, is the Viking cost is reduced from 150.75 to 125.50. That's a ridiculous buff. Vikings are a really well-rounded unit. Why is this happening? This is why I want a written thing. I just don't know why. Vikings are already a pretty decent anti-ground unit against Terran and against Protoss, where there are a lot of mechanical units for them to shoot, where they get their +8 damage, which is a massive bonus. 12 plus 8 is crazy. That's why, landed Vikings are actually quite good against Protoss for harassment and that sort of thing. They're already good against Colossus. They're already pretty good against air units. They became much more microable. Back in the previous patches where Terran was a bit overpowered against Protoss, I was talking about an idea MaxPax had, where he said basically ever since they made the Viking more microable, and Clem's so good at moving the Viking in and out that, it was just so hard to actually focus them down with Stalkers. And it just felt like the Vikings could get off volleys and pull out without you ever really punishing it as a Protoss player. And we were thinking maybe we should nerf the Viking by removing that micro ability or making some change here or there. And something I've talked about in the past and kind of mused over. So it's kind of funny now to see the Viking just get a buff out of nowhere, number one, but also a massive buff, a huge buff. 25 minerals and 25 gas. That is a absolutely monumental buff for a unit that is already heavily used pretty much in every matchup. All right, guys, so looking at this, obviously, I've been working on my own patch notes. It's a work in progress. There's all these notes on the side. I'm working on tons of stuff in here. I've been updating it. I don't think it's finished by any means, but I do think there are some changes from here where, I got sidetracked on really testing this and making the mod for this and getting lots of games out there due to my personal life. But outside of that, I'm like, okay, let's get back on it. Let's really focus on it. And I was already doing that when these notes came out, and I'm like, crap, well, now I don't have much chance to influence them. I'm hoping now, since this is just going to PTR, we have a chance to influence things. The biggest thing that I've recently swapped back to thinking would be really good for the game on, whereas previously I basically had, I would say, set the torch down on, purely because I was not willing to deal with the very aggressive kickback I got from people who said, no, don't slow down StarCraft. And I just was like, I don't care. I just kind of wasn't bothered. The more I've watched, the more I've looked at the issues, the more I think the mid-game kind of going missing in StarCraft 2 is where a lot of the issues come from. I do think the economy is part of the issue with that. So I really do think the 8 worker start is amazing. We've been watching a lot of games on Green Earth's patch mod, where they actually have a really good flow to them. I just love the pacing of that. But most importantly, if you lower the starting worker count, it allows you to lower the amount of supply that you get from your main base buildings, your Nexi, command center, and hatcheries, which means lowering the starting worker count not only allows the game to have an elongated skirmish stage in the early game and a longer mid game, but it also allows us to lower the supply that you get from expanding, therefore making expansions less valuable. The expanding is more expensive, and it slightly nerfs expanding up to 3 bases, up to 4 bases, and rushing to tier 3 units, which is one of the big things we see in StarCraft 2 that we didn't have until, I'd say, about when Legacy of the Void got figured out, about three years or so in, 2019 onwards, is when we started having people just rush 4 bases every game, rush to late game, and a lot of the mid game disappeared and that sort of stuff. But now that we've hit that point where everyone's so good and we understand that's the best way to play, that's a big problem. The other reason why expanding is always a big thing that you need to do in current StarCraft 2 in the Legacy model is the mineral patches. So I also want to change the mineral patches back to Heart of the Swarm values, down from 1800 minerals and 900 to all patches of 1500 minerals. I really think this is such a game changer. You keep the gas values the same. Gas value in Heart of the Swarm would way outlast the actual base. I don't know why they needed, like, there was so much more gas than minerals on the maps. I don't know why they did that. They just did. At the moment, expanding is a cheap prospect. Look, if you don't, your mineral patches start to mine out at 8.5 minutes in the game. So if you're above 36 workers at 8.5 minutes, you really need a third base up, finished. Or you're going to struggle to have efficient mining. Your mineral patch is going to run out, your workers are going to have nowhere to mine from. That's 36 workers. You know, you need that third base. In actual practice, you often need a fast fourth as well, because usually we're much higher on that by workers at that point. So by changing this value, a player who chooses to delay a second, third, or fourth base is only punished by the advantage in workers that their opponent builds. Say you invest in rushing 4 Mutalisks on 2 base, your opponent takes a third base, they get an economy advantage. Their economy's up here, yours is down here. Hopefully, but your tech is up here, theirs is down here. You know that's balanced. The problem is, in that situation normally, their economy's up here, yours is here, your mutas are out, but then your base is mining out. So your economy actually goes even lower. So you get double punished by having your bases mine out super fast in Legacy of the Void, which means going for very high-tech or aggressive strategies earlier are not viable. Now, don't get me wrong, people say, oh, but people do go Mutalist. Yes, they do, but they always have to pair that with a quick expansion. They might delay their third base by 30 seconds or a minute, but they still have to go for it very immediately afterwards, right? And what that does is it does kind of closes the window of overall viable strategies. If you have more options to go for an all-in, not quite do fatal damage, and not get double punished by your own mineral patches running out, or go for teching up a bit quicker, it gives you more of a chance for the game to hang out in that low economy and skirmish stage. It creates more variety in that stage of the game without both players going, oh crap, my base is running out of minerals, I need to take a third, I need to take a fourth, I need to take a fifth base. And you can see how investing in that stuff just to keep your workers able to mine leads to a meta, an optimal meta, where mass expanding is the key, and it is ubiquitous. So there is still a lot of variation in terms of different unit types and going for this first or that first, but the economic variation is very minimalized in current StarCraft 2. And this is something people have misunderstood many times when I've talked about this. They go, oh, but we see infestors, therefore that's strategic variety. And you've got to understand that strategic variety isn't just seeing a certain unit, it's seeing it at a certain timing, and it's how much economy versus army. You know, the basic pillars of real-time strategies. How much do I invest in my economy? How much in my tech? And how much in my army? And having the more freedom to go in different directions with that is really, really cool. So that's just something which would be absolutely amazing. This encourages a wider variety of choices rather than all choices being tied to expand or kill the opponent right now. It gives more room for games to live on in low economy situations without the game hitting an economic wall. So obviously these are two big fundamental changes. I don't think they're going to add this to this BTR, but Classic Games Department, if you're watching, please do consider it. I really think both of these changes would be incredibly healthy for the game. So this document, by the way, is just my highest priority changes if you guys weren't following me, that I've taken from over here, since there's a lot more in there. Now let's go through. There's a lot of other changes in here. I'd love you guys to go check this out. I'm just going to skim through it. I'm not going to explain everything, but Classic Games, please add these. I think these are relatively non-controversial changes. Ravager, build time decreased from 12.14 to 8.5 seconds. This change failed because in the part, this is reverting an old change. That's all it is. I was a big proponent of it. That change failed to open up mid-game aggressive options, but it hurt Zerg all-ins and aggressive options in the process. It was a big failure of a change. We should revert failed changes. Changes that failed to achieve their goal completely should not just hang around as vestigial changes. No, we can't ever revert a change. It's a really bad mindset in game design that if you go back on a decision, if you go this decision, if you're accountable in any way, it's bad. Come on, guys. This is ridiculous. This is not politics. I know it's close to it, but it's not. You know, it's like, oh, he changed his mind on something. Devil man. Like, come on. If we've got proof that something didn't work, we should revert it. Very basic logic. Queen. Cost decrease from 175 to 150 minerals, and transfuse off creep allowed again. I would really love these changes. Transfuse off creep just opens up a lot of cheeky strats. I think in general, just changing the Queen Hatchery Spore Crawler change. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you want to do this at the same time as doing this crazy Shroud change, but if this crazy Shroud change doesn't go through, I don't think making the Spire 50 minerals, 50 gas cheaper and giving Banelings 5 hit points is necessarily enough. Zerg players have been shafted in many ways patch after patch. There is not many Zergs on the ladder. And let's just revert some of the changes that haven't really helped that much. I still feel like Zerg still make 9 queens. I have other options. There are other choices I'd love to experiment with, but I think these are the relatively non-controversial way of doing it. If you guys want to go look at patches or green earth changes, they have some really interesting ones. Like patches just lowers the queen's damage versus ground. He's just like, hey, this unit does less damage versus ground, and it is kind of crap, but also your hatcheries produce a bit more lava. There's some really cool shit you can do with that, which I'd love to try and talk about, but I think right now, hey, we've already got a PTR out. I'm not going to bore you guys by talking about things that are quite so long-winded and complicated, and you know, we're going to keep things in the realm of like stuff I think we could add to this PTR and would be a very clear and relatively obvious positive for the game. Spore Crawler damage and hit point reversion as well. Just put the Spore Crawler back. Lurker, HP buffed from 190 to 200. The reason we want to do that is I'd like to make the Disruptor back to the old damage, and that means it'll two-shot the Lurker either way, so we might as well just give back its hit points. Though it is super tanky, the Lurker, so I don't even know if we need to do that, but I just figure, hey, if we're changing... We changed this because of the Disruptor change. We're reverting the Disruptor change. Let's also revert the Lurker change. That is logical. That is the system. Spire. I don't care about 50 minerals and 50 gas on the Spire. What I do care about, guys, is build time. Don't get me wrong, 50 minerals, 50 gas does matter. It does help. But I think 10 seconds build time, 71 seconds down to 61 seconds is going to encourage it. Spire just takes so long to get going in StarCraft 2, especially with the Legacy of the Void income. You could maybe revert that if you're going to go through with my income changes, but we'll see how we go. Broodlord, I think we should change the attack behavior, do the bug fix, and just try that out from the last patch. It does have far-reaching consequences, but the Broodlord is such a crap unit right now. I think we absolutely need to buff the Broodlord. That's one option. The other option is you give it +1 range. The other option is you just revert the old Broodling nerfs. There are 3 options for the Broodlord. This is the one that I would propose, though. There is no reason that the Broodlord should be such a shitty, useless unit. I dislike it very much. You know, part of my philosophy is we shouldn't be taking away people's toys and fun things just because they're frustrating to play against. Don't get me wrong, that's StarCraft 2, and if we can overall try to remove a lot of frustrating things in a way of redesigning the game to feel a bit more fair and flowy, that can make sense as part of like a cohesive overall picture. But individually, just killing things like the Broodlord over many patches has had a detrimental impact. And these are the things that keep Zerg players who used to win games with a Broodlord timing in the late game, and they try to do it and the Broodlords are useless. It makes them uninstall the game. It makes them not log in and want to play every day. I know, that's how video games work. When your toys get taken away, you don't want to play with your toys anymore. Terran, Raven. Raven now has an auto attack. I just think that would feel really good. Stop Ravens running in and dying. I also think we should lower the subgroup priority so it doesn't block you from stimming when you're accidentally selected. I've talked to pro gamers. Even though some of them don't really want to relearn the muscle memory, they are down for this for the most part. It's just one of those things that would really help when you accidentally have a Raven in your army and it messes up your ability to micro your army. I think this is a really cool idea from patches notes we could add in, guys. It's the Crucio Dampener. Basically, it's one of the techs you can get from the campaign. Nerfed a little bit from the campaign. It reduces siege tank friendly fire splash by 60% and costs a bit, takes a ton of time to upgrade. I think if you're going to add a cool, fun upgrade like this, costs a bunch of money, make it take a long time. You need an armory and a tech lab. It's not going to kick in for a very long time. It's a no-brainer to just add cool stuff like this as an option for Terran players. I think this is very non-controversial because it's time to upgrade and its cost are very expensive and high time, so why not? Next up, Liberator. Liberator cost increased from 150, 125 to 150, 150. Revert the old buff. Also revert the nerf by giving it back +1 range on advanced ballistics. But let me just move this around to make this a bit clearer what order this is, guys. You also want to make it so it doesn't have vision. It is going to go down from 10 vision to 9, so it can't actually see that last vision with the lib range. Much like a siege tank, it needs a spotter unit or a scan. That limits the effectiveness of lib range at abusing dead space on the edges of the maps where queens and stalkers can't reach them, but you can reach a mineral patch. So you can't do that unless you've got scans or spotting units there, which is going to make that much harder to do. It means those spots on maps aren't as problematic, and that's the reason all this stuff changed, is because the lib range was so problematic for map makers to try to avoid these liberator spots. I also think we should up the minimap radius of the Liberator to make it the same as a medevac. So it's easier to see those Liberators coming in on the medevac, on the minimap. It's just way too hard to spot those Liberators. Let's make it easier for the opponents to spot that if they're actually doing a good job of watching their minimap. Next up, guys, for Protoss, my proposed changes are energy recharge does 75 instead of 100. The reason why I'm not going any harder on this is I will be nerfing a few other things as well. Observer surveillance mode vision increase is nerfed from 25% down to 15, so 11 down to 11 vision from 13 sight range. Revelation on Oracle is down to 9 cast range. It's 12 at the moment, which is an absolutely ludicrous cast range. Its AoE is so big, it still has a good range of where it can reveal things. It just isn't as like, oh, I can just tag and see your whole army without there being any risk of me getting caught. Even if you want to split the difference, put that at 9, instead of 9, make it 10 or maybe even 11. There is no reason not to lower the revelation range on the Oracle, in my opinion. The unit is already a fast flyer. It can scout itself. Does it also need to be able to cast a spell that also scouts way further into the enemy territory without there being any risk? I also think hallucinations should have -4 sight range, making it much harder to scout, easy to deny since they can't dodge your Marines, Cyclones, and Queens as easily. At the moment, it is trivial to get a full scout with the Terran base, especially often of the Zerg base. It's not too hard if you don't fly over a Spore Crawler, but with less sight range, it's going to be really hard to pull that off, and it's going to be a bit more, hey, you can still scout pretty well with Hallucinated Phoenix, but you need to put more work into it, number one, and number two, it is less of a sure thing that you will find the tech and the production that you need to spot. I also think Stasis Ward is way too spammable at the moment. I've literally written spamming Stasis Traps as dumb, so we're nerfing 80-second nerf, down from 170 seconds to 90 seconds on Stasis Trap. You guys let me know. I actually kind of despise this spell the most in PvP, I would say. It actually annoys me the most there, where people just like, if they've got the map pressure and they're like, I'm gonna put like 10 Stasis Traps outside your base. It's like, oh my god, this thing's so annoying. But you guys let me know what you think on that. Shield Battery buffed starting energy away from Nexus from 50 to 75 energy. Just helps aggressive options that have been severely nerfed after the proxy Void Ray meta. Void Ray got 2 nerfs as well, so this one wasn't as needed. I think that's a relatively small change. Though, obviously, the fear is, oh, you don't want to make Cannon Battery contain too good. I think it's alright. You guys let me know. Disruptor supply cost decreased from 4 down to 3, and a rework to its damage. So this is a bit of a funky one, but hear me out. It basically reverts the previous damage and supply nerfs, but it also changes the attack to a tiered damage system where the middle 0.75 radius still does full damage, like the old school damage, just kills everything, whilst the outer radius does the recent lower damage, which is still very good against Protoss units in PvP, but it's only going to do the 100 damage to Terran and Zerg. Doesn't quite one-shot Roaches and Ghosts. I would actually probably like to go a bit harder on the Disruptor and change it even more to differentiate those tiers, but I think this is a good kind of familiar stepping stone, which we can test, see how it goes, and then work from there. Next up, guys, we have a big change that really should be completely non-controversial. Did you guys know that normally a Zealot takes 27 seconds to build, but when you upgrade Warp Gate and you turn your gateway into a Warp Gate, it can warp in a Zealot, and 20 seconds later, it can make another Zealot. It immediately cools down that 20 seconds when it starts warping in the first unit. All right, so basically there is no reason to ever have a gateway in warp outside of warp mode, right? It's just there's no reason to do that. It's completely stupid to do so because your units literally build faster and can build inside the enemy's base, which is just ridiculous. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so once Warp Gate's upgraded, you're going to be able to build units out of the regular gateway at a faster rate and even faster than the Warp Gate rate. So you're going to see Zealot build time will go from 27 seconds down to 18. But keep in mind the difference between the Warp Gate Zealot and the Gateway Zealot will be 20 seconds down to 18, right? 10 seconds faster. 10% faster, sorry. Stalker build time 23 seconds, I think, with Warp Gate down to 21 seconds. Once again, just under 10% faster. Adept is going to go down to 18 seconds. High Templar will go down to 28 seconds. Dark Templar, 28 seconds. I think these are down from 32 seconds Warp Gate timing. Basically, it's just going to be a reduction of Gateway build times after Warp Gate is complete. This does not affect Warp Gate cooldowns or Gateway build times before Warp Gate is done. This just lets players play Protoss StarCraft 1 Gateway style if they want to. You can queue up units this way off your gateways, makes it easier on your macro. Overall production is a little bit faster, but of course, reacting to drops or multi-prong attacks is way harder because you don't have the ability to warp in units where you need. But I think it's just cool. This is such a non-controversial change. There is no reason not to do this, to give players an option to play Gateway style if they want to. And I think it is a stepping stone to more fundamental warp gate and warp gate unit changes we could do in the future to make potentially, maybe you make charge. Maybe you just take charge off the Zealot. Maybe you do that, but you make it a better raw fighting unit, right? In other ways. Maybe you bump up its stats. You give it some mid-game upgrades. There's a lot of different things being experimented in different mods. Some people have like a Stalker upgrade you get quite late in the game off the Templar Archives that gives the Stalker 7 range, so it can scale a bit better into the late game. There's a lot of things you can do, but first of all, we need to tear off this band-aid and say, why the hell do we not give players the option of using gateways rather than warp gates? Strategy game, let's have options available to the players. I would say using gateways still probably not going to be done in pro play, but it would be a really fun thing for average Joes to start doing on the ladder, and especially lower level players who would like the ability to queue up units. So each gateway has, say, 2 units queued up, rather than them having to warp in every 20 seconds, will feel really nice. I've also got a few slightly more experimental changes, which I think should still go in, but I don't know, I just feel like people will be more like, oh, that seems scary. First one is Bile no longer instantly destroys force fields. Instead, it destroys 50% of the duration. This is something Patches has been working on for a while. In his mod, seems to work really well there. So basically, you can see there, when it's about to run out, it turns red, and the Ravager basically knocks half its duration. A force field lasts 11 seconds. I think this knocks 5.5 seconds off it or something like that. Now, what would be even cool is if you had a bar just for visual recognition to see how much time's left. But I think in general, this is a really cool change, and it just makes it so the Ravager Bile doesn't hard counter the Sentry nearly as much. Next, Mothership. Abducting a Mothership now only pulls it 50% of the distance. I think this is a really cool idea as well. You could see they were trying to nerf the Mothership by lowering its hit points. We don't need to do that. Instead, do this. Only downside, I've heard this is janky in the editor, the way Patches has done this, and it might not be possible to do this in a smooth way. If that's the case, we may have to scrap it. But in theory, I think that's just so much better. You know, it's nowhere near as brutal. You can still abduct it, but it's nowhere near as brutal as it should be. What's kind of funny is you can see that the way he's done it here is not ideal, because it also takes twice as long or whatever it seems like for the actual. It's not only 50% of the distance, it feels like it's 50% of the speed to get 50% of the distance. So it's real. It does super nerf it. It's like the Mothership's not immune to abduct, but it's semi-immune. It's resistant. It's very resistant to abduct, which I actually like. We've also got Evo Chamber, make the ground carapace upgrades the same cost as shield and other armor upgrades, I think is a good change. We've been seeing a lot of the upgrades get cheaper across the different factions over the last few years. We've seen Terran and Protoss upgrades both get cheaper. I think it would be really cool if we kind of brought the Zerg ones in line, since Zerg have been having a hard time. Our world champion, of course, excluded. Cyril's kind of a bit of an exception to the rule, isn't he? Also, Overlord. I do actually think, even though at first I was a bit resistant to Harstem's idea of making Overlord drops available with Evo Chamber again, I think if we do it with this one addendum, instead of 25 minerals and 25 gas per Dropalord, make it 50 minerals and 50 gas, so it's not so frigging cheap to drop. So this opens up drop tech earlier, makes it a little more expensive to go for, gives some really cool options to Zerg. I would love to see this. I don't see why we don't experiment with something like that, especially on the PTR, to see how it goes. It just could be so much fun. And in general, similar to Queens being able to transfuse off creep, I want there to be more options for Zerg strategies, because that's where Zergs feel the most compressed, is they feel so limited strategically and with options. Things like this, things like the Queen transfuse change should do really well to open up that feeling of, hey, I actually have multiple good options in the early game and mid game I can do as a Zerg that aren't just part of this very narrow list. I also think the Infestor and Viper should get a regular auto attack. I don't know really why I put this in the more controversial changes, whilst I put the Raven one in the regular changes. Maybe it's just because people hate Zerg recently, because Cyril keeps winning stuff. Cyril, lose some tournaments, please. But yeah, I don't know. I just think if the High Templars had an auto attack for years, I think all spellcasters should have an attack that does like 5 damage once every 2 seconds, makes them shoot from about 6 range so they don't just run to the front of the battle. Doesn't really contribute realistic, meaningful damage output to situations, but it just allows it to be easier for players to micro. I don't know why we've always had special rules for Protoss. They get a Warp Gate button, other players don't get a production button for them built in. Protoss gets High Templar that throws snowballs, other races don't get casters that attack, even though they have it in the campaigns and in co-op. It's in the editor, it's there's graphics, there's animations, let's do this. It is unfair that everyone hates on Protoss as much as they do, but you know, it's been part of the way Blizzard back in the day kept adding special rules to Protoss, and they're like, oh, we're going to give you guys some nice quality of life changes, not give it to the other factions. That really did, in my opinion, lean into it. Kind of put weight on Protoss as like, hey, why are you getting special treatment? So I really don't see why we shouldn't do that. All right, guys, this has been a long video. I'm in an Airbnb. There's a pantry. There's a pantry behind me. You guys can see. I realized I got my cupboard. There's a pantry. I'm in an Airbnb. There's some food in there. I should have had that closed while I was doing this video. I think these changes are a little bit half-baked. I think there's some good ideas in them, but just half-baked. That being said, it's a PTR post, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I've heard whispering, someone said there might be a patch in November. I don't know if that's real or not. People just make things up in the StarCraft community constantly. I'm hoping we have at least a month until a patch goes live. I really hope, if Classic Games are watching, they can put some of these changes in. I just think these changes are necessary. I've already messaged them out to everyone I know, either involved with Blizzard or involved in the previous former Balance Council, and I've said, hey guys, bloody put some of these changes in here. I think these are going to be good for the game. You guys let me know what you think. I don't have particularly high hopes that much, if any of my changes will get through, if I'm being realistic, but I'm going to be glass half full and say there is time. We could do this. You guys let me know what you disagree with from my changes, what you agree with from my changes, as well as what you disagree with and agree with from the Blizzard changes over there. Thanks so much for watching. I will follow up on this in a day or two. I'm sure things are going to evolve very quickly as we get updates on this this PTR post and everything in there. Final note, there's going to be a ton of bug fixes that I've also pushed through in those same channels, which hopefully get through as well, because I know there's a bunch of modders who've fixed so many other bugs than this. Hopefully we can get those in there as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.